First tonight, Russia says it plans to formally annex the 4 Ukrainian regions which held referendums earlier this week. It says it'll take control of those areas in a ceremony on Friday. The widely discredited ballots were held in Russian-occupied parts of eastern Ukraine. The Kremlin-backed authorities in Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia and Kherson said the results showed that people overwhelmingly voted to join the Russian Federation. Separatists reported huge margins of victory, saying that in Luhansk, 98% of voters favored annexation. The European Union and the US are planning to impose more sanctions on Russia for holding what they call sham referendums.
О ситуации в Донбассе и на Украине.
About the situation in Donbas and Ukraine, I am sure that I won't announce this subject like that anymore. The age of covering that subject in this manner is over. On 27th September, the referendums on joining Russia were completed in the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. High attendance and the results of the will expressed by the residents speak for themselves. The people do not want to go back to their past lives.
Этих регионов в состав России. Высокая явка проголосовавших и результаты, они на весь мир громко
The people have made a conscious and free choice. They stated firmly to the whole world their wish to be with Russia, to forever tie their fate to our country, which was, is, and will be.
So Maria Zakharova, who is a Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman. Now, the Swedish Coast Guard is reporting a 4th leak in the Nord Stream pipeline in the Baltic Sea. Russia says it's launched a terrorism investigation over the damage and called for a meeting of the UN Security Council. The EU and NATO say the leaks were caused by sabotage. Nord Stream 1 usually ships gas directly from Russia to Germany, but Moscow suspended deliveries earlier this month because of a standoff over sanctions. Denmark and Sweden first reported the leaks near the island of Bornholm. Shipping near the lines has been restricted. Norway is deploying its military to protect its oil and gas installations. Well, for more of these stories, let's speak to Arise chief correspondent John Cookson, who's been monitoring developments from London. Good to see you, John. Let's start with those nettlesome referendums and the annexation. The whole script for this has, of course, been written by the Kremlin. Act 1, the so-called referendums, seen as a smokescreen for annexation. And now Act 2, the final act, which you're going to tell us about.
Indeed, Charles. Well, Red Square in Moscow has already been sealed off. There's a ring of security steel around it for this big ceremony tomorrow in the Georgian Hall in the Grand Palace of the Kremlin. President Putin, of course, will be there. There'll be a lot of ceremonial bands playing, trumpets, and lots of scrolls and pens getting out, and the accession process will be underway. It's then followed in the evening, Charles, by a concert. Now, we've been here before, of course, back in 2014, when exactly the same playbook played out when Russia illegally annexed Crimea. So this is a repeat, really, of that. And you may remember Charles, Putin appearing triumphant on the stage at that time, and no doubt he'll be doing the same thing. The whole process due to be rubber stamped by the Russian parliament next week. And according to international lawyers, the whole process is a complete breach of international law. You cannot, one country cannot go in, do a land grab of another country and declare that part of yours. But Putin doesn't care. This is his big plan. And it's a major milestone in this conflict, and it's interesting to see what will happen next. Because if this is Russian territory and it becomes attacked, what indeed will the Russians do about that, Charles?
Well, absolutely. That's the big question, isn't it? And what do you think all this tells us, John, about President Putin's thinking? I mean, is he not just deep in, he's all in with one escalation after another?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to look back on some of the things that he's written about in the past, and he's repeated it again today. This line that he keeps trotting out, that the problems that Russia and Ukraine have now all goes back to the collapse of the Soviet Union back in 1991, which is a veiled indication that you'd like to see the Soviet Union restored as part of a new Russian empire. And he's been talking about that again today with security chiefs from former Soviet countries, and has repeated the same story. He doesn't see Ukraine as a separate country. He sees it part of Mother Russia, and that's his mindset, and that's what he's been selling to the Russian people on state-controlled television. And to an extent, it seems that the Russian people have bought it. He's not at any time recently been possibly toppled in a coup. There's no sign of that. His ratings, however, are falling. There's a firm called Levada within Russia, which had his approval ratings at 83 last month and now tumbled to 77, not a great deal, but something that might give him concern. But that's what he sees. He sees Ukraine just as part of Russia, and no doubt this land grab must be part of a bigger picture for him.
And John, as we attempt to assess where things go from here, is it now about how the rest of the world reacts to this annexation and what this tells us about the trajectory of the war?
Yeah. Well, look, what can the West do? They can shout and say, look, it's wrong. They can impose fresh sanctions, and they've done all of that already. The EU and the US have imposed fresh sanctions on Russia, although the EU sanctions have to be approved by all members, and it's not entirely clear that possibly Hungary would support fresh sanctions against Russia, in which case the whole sanctions that are being proposed then collapse and have to be rethought. But all they can do is to keep on supplying military hardware to the Ukrainians, and that's about it. Unless Putin does something absolutely crazy and uses a tactical nuclear weapon, which he's hinted this week that he might, and then we're into different territory altogether.
And John, a final quick word from you about the Swedish Coast Guard reporting a fourth leak in the Nord Stream pipeline in the Baltic Sea.
Yeah, and still the mystery goes on as to who was behind this act of international terrorism. It was sabotage of these two gas pipelines, Nord Stream 1 and 2. It was first thought that there were three holes in the pipeline. Now it seems that there are four, and all the time, even though one only was in use, it still has hundreds of thousands of cubic meter of gas in it, and methane still tonight flying into the air from all of these leaks. It's terribly dangerous. I mean, scientists and other officials cannot get near on boats because it's just too dangerous to go near. Methane, of course, highly explosive, and contributing, of course, to the difficulty with the ozone layer in the atmosphere. I mean, it really is a disaster, and all they can do is to wait till this gas that was already stable in the pipes, that wasn't being pumped, actually gets to the atmosphere. But how long that's going to take, no one really knows.
Much obliged to you, John. Thanks ever. John Cookson is Arise chief correspondent, and he was talking to me about developments around Ukraine and Russia.